recording.
Are you sure we're recording?
Is it? Wait.
Yeah, it's working now.
Okay, perfect.
The bar only just came up.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this interview, Tom.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask you to start with telling us what you are running for.
So I'm running for Director of Events and Services, also known as DoES. It's one of the 6 SAB positions. So it's a full-time job, salaries, everything. There's an office in the union where all the SABs live, which usually students could come and visit us,
Yeah.
but obviously not at the moment. And the DoES is usually in charge of stuff like BOPs, so any big events in the union, as well as overseeing stuff like bars, cafes, marketing. So really anything to do with the union building is relevant to the DoES role.
Oh, really? I see. Yeah, that's really helpful. I was going to ask you to kind of describe what you think is the most important role that DoES needs to play.
The most important role.
Yeah, like you described quite a range of things that you think DoES is involved in or should be responsible for. So I'm curious what you think is the most important thing that a DoES needs to kind of keep in mind or like needs to take accountability for.
Yeah, so there's a few different responsibilities that are really important in different ways.
Yeah.
So obviously organising Freshers Week and Grad Ball, which I've tried to do Freshers Week best I could, but obviously it's not the same as it normally would. Those are obviously the main responsibilities in a normal year in terms of kind of improving the student experience a bit for everyone. But there's also things like, so I'm chair of discipline committee, which if you do it wrong can have a really big effect on an individual's student experience. So one thing I did last year in the role is I kind of rewrote all the discipline procedure to make it a lot fairer. So before there was stuff like if you even try drinking when you're underage, it was up to a 2-year ban if you do it when you're 16. It was a minimum 6 months. And obviously that would kind of ruin potentially the first year or 2 of your university experience. So I think those, I would say, are the most important things as DoES. But also just kind of being, I guess, having market awareness of what students want and being approachable to get their feedback and how to improve all the services and spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you used the word market awareness. I wonder if there's anything specific you had in mind with that, or was it just as you say, like feedback from students, etc.?
So it's kind of 2 sides to it. So there's getting the feedback from the students.
Yeah.
There's also being aware of kind of the entertainment industry outside of universities. So it's been a bit less to do with this role this year.
Oh.
There would usually be a lot of kind of booking external acts, especially for stuff like Freshers Week.
Yeah.
So having an awareness of that process is really important to kind of giving a professional representation of St Andrews to external companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I see what you mean, as in like bringing in the external world and introducing it into the bubble, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that. I mean, it's clear that you have a very deep knowledge of what the role entails, and the details of that. But I guess that's kind of a moot point, if you will allow me to say that, because you've been the DoES for the past year. So, that's kind of an advantage, I think, in a way that we don't necessarily have to give you credit for. But you're welcome to dispute that now. I'd like to know what kinds of things you think you did the best, or what was your proudest moment in your year past as a DoES?
I think I would dispute that. The fact that I kind of know everything because I'm in this role. I think a lot of this stuff I knew before going into this role, just from stuff like running Star and just being really interested in the music industry in general.
Yeah.
Also, this year really hasn't been normal for the DoES. Like, it's affected all the roles, but I think it's probably fair to say the DoES has been kind of hardest hit. So, for example, I'm probably the only DoES who's never put on a BOP or even a club night.
Right.
I don't even have access to the room booking system, and those would usually be most of the jobs. Having said that, I think there are things that are still a core part of the role that I've done pretty well this year. So especially on kind of marketing. So improving the website, that was a big part of my year. And obviously the union's Instagram is now much more active. I think something else I'm really happy with is the marquee. So I was working with the university to get the marquee up and running, and it was really, really useful in semester one. I think it meant we were pretty much the only university that had societies doing stuff in person. So it was really kind of industry leading for universities. And even in my position, it is hard to remember that just because you're so like in the middle of it. You can't kind of take yourself out of, say, Andrews to realize no one else is doing something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. So if I asked you to rewind a year back, how would you think is something that you would tell yourself back then that you didn't know, or like you were surprised by, or you were kind of caught unaware of, that you would give yourself, like advice that you give yourself?
If I could go back a year today, so it'd be 2 weeks before the first lockdown.
Okay. Exactly today.
That,
this
is
very
it?
moment.
Is it exactly?
5:37.
It might be, for all I know. I wouldn't tell myself anything about the C word. I would.
How do you feel about that? What would you mean by that? Do you feel like everything's gone so smoothly that you didn't really, everything was according to what you'd expected?
I think, obviously not. That's a really good question. I'll tell you what I would tell myself a year ago. Something that surprised me about being a SAB. I kind of went into the role expecting that I would represent the union, and kind of the union as an entity would help me kind of push against the university to make the university do stuff. But it's actually, a lot of the time, it's the other way around. So as a SAB, you work with the university so much, and quite often the university is helping you to make stuff happen in the union, which is really weird for two organizations that are meant to be completely separate. But that's just the way it's worked out this year.
I see. That's a perfect way to kind of bring me into a more specific question that reading through your manifesto I had. You mentioned this particular part about bringing up the councils and elections in section 5, digging up council plans, motions, etc. Can you tell us a bit more about that, kind of what motivated you to pick this out as an issue and what you plan to do with it?
Do you mean the point about going back and getting old council's files? Yeah, so a very small part of what I've done on the website is to start doing this. So if you look at previous versions of the website on Web Archive, you can see the council's page. And if you try and find a specific set of minutes from a meeting or a motion of stuff the union supported, it's nearly impossible because those pages were so hard to use. So I've already made it a lot easier to find stuff we've done this year and last year in councils. So it's one way of making it kind of more accessible for any student to see what council is up to, what it supports. But another problem I've noticed is motions pass. So a councillor will bring something to councils, it'll get voted on, and sometimes it just gets forgotten. So there'll be an action point on it for someone to change something, change a document or policy somehow. And there'll also be a review date for someone to look at it in a year or two to check that it's going okay. And this has come up time and time again, is things just slip through the net. And I think a big reason for that is the responsibility for checking on past motions would be either with the president or the chair or whatever position holds the motion. And if they can't find the old files, how are they going to do it?
Yeah, no, that's such an excellent point to bring up, something that I guess I wouldn't know, for example, because I am not involved in such runnings inside the union. Is this part of DoES's role, do you think? Because intuitively, I wouldn't imagine this kind of thing is something you'd pay attention to.
Yes, it's definitely not anything I expect most students to be interested in.
Okay.
It is really just kind of streamlining how kind of bureaucracy bit of the union works, which I hate saying, but that's just how it is. In terms of the DoES remit, I think I might have a warped mindset of this just because of the past year I've had. I've sort of molded the role into what I can do. But I think councils sort of comes under everyone's remit, especially for SABs, because it is so essential to us trying to improve stuff. So for example, random stuff like gathering content for the weekly SAB email, that you wouldn't expect that to particularly be the DoES role, but just because no one else took it on this year, I ended up doing that. So there are things where if a SAB sees something they want to improve and it's not anyone's specific responsibility, then yeah, they can work on that.
Yeah, makes sense. So it's really about prioritizing things and knowing the internal details that would actually make it a teamwork. Yeah, absolutely. So before I jump onto the more like casual questions, I'll just ask the perhaps most challenging one, which is what do you think is your your greatest weakness or something that you've really not done well this year as DoES?
Yes, I think definitely over summer, I had a really hard time trying to plan for September because it really felt like, and even through semester one, it was like the guidelines are changing. They're changing what the tier system is. The tiers are changing, and FIFE is changing tier. And all of this sort of combined to make it impossible to plan for one set of circumstances. So you kind of had to keep multiple circumstances in mind and just work on different things as much as you can.
Yeah.
I think it worked out okay in the end. I was honestly quite happy with how Freshers Week went. And I mean, I asked so many people in advance what they would do. No one had any idea. I think stuff like Clan Warfare and the Scavenger Hunt and even the Magician. I love the Magician. They were all good events, but they definitely should have been marketed better. And it was just a case of it was all finalized too late because of restrictions. One other thing I would like to do a lot better this year is having a direct link with event officers for societies. So I was looking through old DoES emails, and this is something DoES used to do like 4 or 5 years ago, and it just kind of stopped. They would send an introduction email to all the society event officers, just saying, hello, here's how I can help you this year. And it's just a small thing that really should happen every year.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, before we go, then let me ask you some less particular questions. What do you think is the weirdest color that a bird can have? Oh, you're muted.
Oops. Light blue.
Light blue.
Yes.
If a bird is light blue, it would no longer be a bird. It would have to be some other creature. Or do you
Not
mean that it
necessarily.
just can't be or it's just that it's strange?
I just have an image in my head of a bird with blue feet. And when you said strange bird, that came to mind.
Okay.
And I'm pretending not to Google it right now. Yeah, it is the blue-footed booby, of course.
All right. And the final question is, what is the most disgusting thing to put on a toast?
I don't like butter, so I'm going to say butter.
Very low bar.
I don't get the point.
All right, well, that's all my questions, Tom. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Best of luck. And yeah, see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.